Welcome to Speak English Now podcast with your host, Georgiana, the podcast that will help you to speak English fluently with no grammar and no textbooks.
Hello, everybody. I am Georgiana, your English teacher and founder of SpeakEnglishPodcast.com. My mission is to help you to speak English fluently. We all know that American and British English sound different most of the time. But did you know there's also a difference in vocabulary? That's right. There are spelling, vocabulary, and even specific grammar differences between the two. Last week, we started with a series on vocabulary differences between American and British English. Today, we will continue with this series. If you didn't listen to last week's episode, you might want to do so right now. Just go to SpeakEnglishPodcast.com and select episode 93. And with a point of view story, you're gonna compare the different grammar points. It's the perfect way to learn grammar and new vocabulary without memorizing. Okay, let's start. I'm gonna tell you a word in American English, and I'll ask you to guess what would be the equivalent word in British English. Ready? Let's start with the first word. In American English, we use the word truck when we refer to a large, heavy road vehicle used for carrying goods, materials, or troops. Can you guess the equivalent in British? Yes. In the United Kingdom, people use the word lorry. Again, in American, we call it truck, and in British, lorry. Let's continue. After washing the dishes, we use a dish towel to dry the dishes. Can you guess which word is used in British English? That's right. People call it tea towel or tea cloth in the UK. So in American, we call it dish towel, and in British, tea towel or tea cloth. Let's continue. In the States, people live in an apartment. Do you know the word in British English? I'm sure you know it. Just think about it. Yes, that's right. In British, they use the word flat. Again, in American, we say apartment, and in British, flat. Let's continue with number 4, and I will start with an example. I live on the first floor, and my neighbor on the second floor. Simple, right? Not really. Let me explain why. The equivalent in British for the first floor would be the ground floor. The second floor in British is called the first floor. Confusing, right? So let me repeat the example in American. I live on the first floor and my neighbor on the second floor. Now in British. I live on the ground floor and my neighbor on the first floor. Let's continue with number 5. In American, we use the word Z to refer to the last letter of the alphabet. What's the word in British English? That's right. In British, they use the word Z. So in American, we say Z, and in British, Z. Let's continue with number 6. At the end of each sentence, we usually use the word period. Period is also used to indicate that a decision is irrevocable. For example, I forbid you to go to that concert. Period. What's the word used in British English? Exactly. In British English, they use the word full stop instead of period. So in American, period, and in British, full stop. Number 7. Did you know that your geographic area is identified by zip code? Do you know how to say this in British English? That's right. In the United Kingdom, they call it postal code. Again, in American, it's zip code, and in British, postal code. Number 8. Example. What's your timetable tomorrow? When will you get some time to listen to the podcast? We use the word timetable to ask about someone's plans or their availability, although in British English they use the word schedule. In the UK, it's more common to use the word schedule or schedule instead of timetable. So in American it's timetable and in British schedule or schedule. Number 9. Example. I have made an error. Can I borrow your eraser? In American English, we use the word eraser when we want to erase something that we have written. In British, they use a different word. Can you guess? Yep, in British English, they call it rubber. So again, in American we say eraser, and in British, rubber. Let's continue with number 10. Example. I'm tired. I can't climb the stairs. Let's take the elevator. What's the equivalent of the word elevator in British English? That's right. In British English, it's called lift. Again, in American, it's elevator, and in British, lift. Let's continue with the point of view story. This kind of story will help you to improve your English grammar. It's very simple. I tell you the same story more than once. Every time I change a grammatical aspect. So you can see how grammar changes and you can compare. You just have to listen. You listen to the story in the first person in the past tense. I'm Tom, and I'm an American. Last year, I visited my best friend in London. When I arrived at my destination, it was raining cats and dogs. So I immediately sought refuge. I entered the store hoping to buy a raincoat or even new clothes. I was completely soaked, so I wasn't surprised to see everyone staring at me. Since I felt uncomfortable, I tried to get some sympathy. So I told the salesman that my pants were very wet. Surprisingly, I didn't get the answer I expected. Instead of showing compassion, the shop assistant started laughing out loud. I was very disappointed and felt humiliated. I expected Londoners to be much more polite. Later, however, when I told my friend what had happened, I felt even more ashamed. It turns out that in British English, the word pants means underwear. I should have used the word trousers instead of pants. Let's listen to the same story in the third person in the past tense. Last year, an American named Tom visited his best friend in London. When he arrived at his destination, it was raining cats and dogs. So he immediately sought refuge. He entered the store hoping to buy a raincoat or even new clothes. Tom was completely soaked, so he wasn't surprised to see everyone staring at him. Since he felt uncomfortable, he tried to get some sympathy. Surprisingly, Tom didn't get the answer he expected. Instead of showing compassion, the shop assistant started laughing out loud. Tom was very disappointed and felt humiliated. He expected Londoners to be much more polite. Later, however, when he told his friend what had happened, he felt even more ashamed. It turns out that in British English, the word pants means underwear. Poor Tom. He should have used the word trousers instead of pants. Alright, it's the end of this point of view story. I use this successful method in my courses. Imagine a whole story told this way. Instead of having to memorize boring grammar rules, you can use this method to learn grammar. It's more enjoyable, but also more effective. Now you can improve your speaking and grammar with my enchanted course, only by listening. Go to enchantedcourse.com and bring your English to an advanced level. Well, that's it for today. Please help me spread the word about the podcast. Tell your friends about the show and leave a comment on iTunes when you have a minute. That would make me very happy. I'll be back next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Did you enjoy today's episode? Get the transcript now at speakenglishpodcast.com. speakenglishpodcast.com.